My name is Beth Novak. I'm a professor at New York University, where I also direct the Governance Lab. So I'm here today to talk about how technology is actually changing how we understand expertise and how government can do a better job of getting that expertise to govern better and smarter. The realization would seem so self-evident that you should want to tap into expertise and what people know and can do seems a rather self-evident idea, but it isn't really to everybody. Why? Because the fundamental view, first of all, of citizens is as being not very bright, not very willing, not very able, not very helpful or productive, and so there's a tremendous reluctance to open the floodgates to participation, number one. Number two, the notion of actually creating, let me say, a variety of smaller forms of co-production, co-participation, and engagement goes against a very long-standing view of uniform, mass-based participation, right? Participation is typically part of the communications function, and we do the thing that will allow us to reach the most number of people, right? So e-petitions and We the People is about reaching a lot of people. You need to have 100,000 signatures on a petition because that reduces the cost of engagement. And the notion that we should actually have many, 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 many different forms of engagement is actually very, I think it goes against the grain of what we're used to. The surprise is how hard this has been, and I think the surprise of the next 5 years is going to be, you know, how much easier this is going to become, I hope, if we can do a couple of key things that we need to get us there, which include also some legislative changes that allow us to recognize the importance of doing this. So government can use these technologies in two ways. First, it has to do with simply understanding what are the assets we have within government. That's the civil service, the public servants who work for government, now who today have titles like deputy, manager, and director, which tell us very little about what somebody knows and can do. But when we use digital tools to allow us to better index, essentially, and make searchable what the know-how is, then we can organize teams, we can organize groups in new ways to solve problems in a more agile and more informed fashion. The civil service is only the first step, though. Then we have to reach out to citizenry, because the best asset we have in our communities is the intelligence of our citizens.
Could you say something about money? Because in the government, the full-time civil servants are obviously paid, in some countries very, very generously, but most of what you've been describing is entirely unpaid, voluntary giving from, you know, the poor citizen to the rich state. How should that be handled? Do people need rewards or points, or, you know, where will this all go in terms of the money aspect?
Something that might take you or me a very long time and be very hard work to figure out is a very easy job for somebody who does that thing on a full-time basis. That was the lesson of peer-to-patent. What took a patent examiner 15 to 20 hours and they still couldn't do the research was 10 minutes of insight from somebody out there who knows something. On challenge.gov, what you're seeing is people who are solving these problems, and by the way, they are paid for those solutions, or they have the prospect of being paid, but they often take very little work from the person for whom it is that it's, again, 10 minutes of insight for them because they know where it's a very difficult job for the full-time civil servant. The important point in this is that what we need to do, and this is not just for reasons of public and civic service, but for reasons also of matching job seekers to available jobs, is we need far more standardization around the definition of skills and the ability to make those indicia of skills digitally searchable. So private sector job givers are actually very eager to have a better understanding of what are the skills of would-be job seekers. Job seekers very much want to grease the skids of the ability to find in the jobs and get matched to the jobs that are available and that are well suited to them. And some of that same momentum around standardization and skill definition that we're seeing for the private sector in order to accelerate employment, or this the same kind of infrastructure building and standardization that's going to help us do a better job of searching for what people know, also for public purposes. So I think we're going to see more of that driven by private sector demands, but that will help us also in this case to better understand who's out there. So my favorite example, of course, of technology of expertise is something very straightforward. It's the way in which the London Air Ambulance, a project I might add supported by Nesta, has made it possible to have off-duty doctors, nurses, paramedics, and other medical professionals put their credentials online and thereby become part of a network that's used to help save lives in the event of accidents or heart attacks. So thanks to the ability to search for who is a doctor or who is a nurse and the openness of 999 emergency calls, we can co-locate people who are standing next to somebody who may be having a heart attack. That dramatically increases the coverage of what is traditionally done by fire and police today and ambulance to allow us to save lives and improve people's health and well-being.
Is the vision you're painting one in which accountability becomes harder to administer? And do we need a similar sort of innovative thought process about how we hold people to account in an open system? So if a first responder screws it up, who do I hold to account?
So there obviously are ways in which, as we innovate in the way that we get expertise, that we have to still think about how do we maintain the values of transparency, how do we maintain the values of accountability. The statutes that we have in place and how we create these advisory committees, for example, are all designed to really safeguard those values, right? We should have a certain degree of transparency. What that's left us with in terms of a legacy is a very slow and outdated process for how we get expertise. So we still, I agree, have to be conscious of those values of accountability, of transparency, but I think this helps us to do that even better. Because when you bring more of these processes online, when you start to have more evidence-based processes, I can still have people, bureaucrats or politicians, who make decisions based purely on values and rejecting all the evidence. But there becomes more of a record, at least. There becomes a greater source of expertise, and I think it becomes more difficult to make unaccountable decisions, which is what we can often do today when the expertise we get is behind closed doors. We need to measure the feedback and see in what ways this is leading to better professional development, better satisfaction, but ultimately to better outcomes in terms of people's lives and in terms of our communities, and whether this is really leading to better results. In the end, the World Bank having a skill finder database of skills, we have to measure that on the basis of whether that helps to decrease poverty in the world, and that is the ultimate test. The message I want people to take away from today's event is that citizens are smart, that for too long we have treated each other as really lacking the ability, the capacity, the time to participate in government in meaningful ways. That's why the only ways, the few ways we have to participate is by voting. You know, once a year at best, once every 4 years more likely. But we can do more than that. We can do more than just watch the watchers. Instead, what we have the ability now to do is to really co-produce and co-participate in governing when we can use technology to better match the demand for expertise to the supply of it. And there's plenty of it in supply if only we can reach out to and make use of what people know, what their experience is, what their wisdom is, and what they care about.